Hello everyone and welcome to another brand new edition of Political Frenemies. We are the podcast where a Liberal Democrat and a Conservative and our guest, who will come to you in just a moment, debate the week's news and politics very robustly indeed, but remain friends at the end. That's why we're called Political Frenemies. I'm Mathew Hulbert. I'm a Lib Dem activist and former Lib Dem councillor. As I say, we'll come to our guest in just 1 second, but I better say hello to him. It's my fellow co-host. It's former Tory advisor when they were last in opposition on defence matters, academic, historian, doctor, law, everything. It's Chris Newton. Chris, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, if you're new to this podcast, I'm not a lord, not lord yet anyway. But although I'm not quite sure which party would ennoble me at the moment. But there you are.
Maybe a Lord Spiritual, Chris.
Lord Spiritual, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting because we might come on to this when we talk about reform, that we're never quite sure which party Chris is aligned to, if any, at the moment. So we might come to that in a little bit. But joining us this weekend, we're absolutely delighted about this, making his second appearance on the pod. Is my friend and yours. It's Andy Chandler, Lib Dem activist, Yellow Rebel YouTuber, and of course, co-host, along with me, of the other podcast that we do, which is Mathew and Andy. So please do go and check that out. Andy, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. We can't get away from each other, can we? When we're doing our own podcast, I'm back here again. And I just want to thank you both for having me on. I'm really excited for doing debates and panel discussions again, since my channel's been a little bit neglected when it comes to that side of podcasting. And also, congratulations for nearly hitting 100 subscribers. I've just had a quick look on your channel, and it's doing very, very well from its very humble beginnings. And to sort of end this off, and because I am Catholic, I want to say to you both, Felicem Natalem Christi, which means Merry Christmas in Latin. So Merry Christmas to you both. Although I am very disappointed for the lack of decorations. I'm not sure if your audience can see, but I've got with me a Christmas tree on the side.
I do. I don't know if you can see it, Andy, but I do have a little tree on my bookcase. You will see it when it pans to full screen with me, but it is there.
Can I just say that I know I've not got any decks up at the moment, but Andy, bless him, as if he doesn't see enough of me, God bless his heart. Andy is visiting this weekend, and one of the little activities we've got planned is to decorate my flat. So hopefully next time I'm on any kind of podcast, be it this or ours or whatever, it should be all decked out. So I'm really looking forward to that. Shall we talk about what we're going to be talking about on the podcast today? It's going to be a real busy one. And ordinarily, we'd talk about, the general politics of the week that are being covered elsewhere, and we will be doing that. But we've got our own little exclusive today, because I had I don't want to kind of overstate it, but I had a little bit of an interaction, we shall call it, earlier today with a certain Mr. Wes Streeting, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and who knows, maybe the next Prime Minister as well. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about Illiberal Labour. What is going on with the Labour government on jury trials, on stopping elections, and all the rest of it. We'll be talking about that. And finally, is there going to be, and I know this is one in particular for Dr. Newton to get into as well as the rest of us, is there going to be a Tory-Reform Pact? So lots of views on that. So folks, let's do it. Okay, so let's start then with the day that I've had, because as we're recording this on Friday evening, I've literally just been back home for all of about 20 minutes, because I spent most of the day travelling to and from and being in London, our capital city, London. And I was down there today with my friends and colleagues from the Just Treatment campaign group, and we were doing a little action that has been in the planning for quite a while now, because obviously these things have to be planned. Outside a peaceful action, I should point out, outside the constituency office of Wes Streeting in Ilford North. Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and of course the local member for Ilford North. He just about scraped through at the last election. And basically, this was we didn't expect him to be there. We thought it was an outside chance that on a Friday, on a constituency day, he might actually be in the constituency office, but we really didn't expect it at all. And we were just going to do this peaceful action outside his office, where we've got, I think Chris will put some photos up, but where we've got a banner, and we'd concocted this thing where the banner, we'd given it some arms, and we were asking who pulls the strings of the Secretary of State, because he's not wanted to meet with us as a patient representative group, which you think that he would do, wouldn't you, as the Secretary of State? But he does, and this is just a matter of fact. We can talk about whether it means anything in a second, but he has taken more than £200,000 worth of donations from private care providers, and we can talk about what that means, if anything, in a second. So we were going to do this action, and we'd literally just got there outside his constituency office, and we were setting up, and out of the door came Wes Streeting. So we were a little bit kind of shocked because we hadn't really expected him to be there. So then we had this little thing where, to be fair to him, he gave us 2 or 3 minutes of his time. We told him what we were there for. We asked him why he hadn't been prepared to meet with us thus far. I talked to him about ambulances and emergency care and the fact that things don't seem to be getting much better on that front. And we asked him about these private donations. Now, he had answers on all these points, as you'd expect Wes Streeting to do, but it was just one of those weird things that we hadn't expected him to be there. We thought we'd just record our videos, etc., and off we popped. But he was actually there, and so it turned out to be quite a morning for us. So I can go into a bit more detail in a sec, but Andy, just to you first of all, I can just say to you that it was a real surprise to see him there, and to suddenly we were there with the Secretary of State. But I guess I can say, good on him for at least speaking to us. He could have just gone on his way. He could have said, no, you'll have to contact my office, but he did speak to us.
Yeah, I just want to play devil's advocate on this, because you said you asked him why he hasn't met with patient representatives. I'd be curious to know what his reply was to that, and is there a danger that, because obviously it's quite a new organisation, but it has been around for quite a while now, but is there a perception that it might be seen as a little bit of a fringe group, because it's made up of quite a few, a sort of big coalition of sort of lefties, and I think you even have some very socialist people in there. So I'm just curious to know what his response was when you challenged him, and why he didn't meet for your organisation, Just Treatment.
Yeah, so I should just point out that I've been involved with Just Treatment for about a couple of years now, and obviously it was after the death of my mum, 2 days after she waited 11 hours for an ambulance in July 2022, and I felt that given my voice as a former journalist and as a former counsellor, that if I didn't speak up on some of these matters, who was going to? And so that's why I've done a lot of interviews, about what happened to mum, as painful as it always is. And Just Treatment got in touch with me and said, look, we run this campaign. We want to see a better NHS. We want to see a properly funded NHS from our perspective. We want to see a properly public NHS. And my views aligned with theirs. So that's how I got involved with Just Treatment. And I've done a number of actions with them. Always peaceful actions. Always peaceful actions. We're not about anything other than that. But yeah, you're right, Andy. His answer was interesting on that. He says he does meet with patients, but we kind of gently put back to him that, you might have what appear to be quite stage-managed meetings with patients, with certain patients that aren't going to rock the boat, we would argue very much, whereas we're a patient group of people who, in one way or another, either us directly or our families, have suffered as a result of what we would consider to be the underfunding of the NHS and the increasing privatisation of the NHS. So he says he does meet with patient groups. I should just point out that we got, whilst he was on camera, because it was really funny, obviously he'd just come out of the office, we weren't all set up or anything, and we weren't expecting him. Thankfully, a couple of members of our team had the good thought to get their phones out pretty darn quickly and start recording this interaction with the Secretary of State. So we got him on camera saying that he will have a proper sit-down meeting with us, and so you better darn well do that, Mr. Streeting, because you've said you will. So we're looking forward to that a great deal. In terms of, so on the private donations thing, Chris, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on this. He said that look, all MPs take donations, that it doesn't mean that it changes policy or anything like that. I would argue, and I know that Mr. Streeting would deny this, but I would argue that, and I'm sure he'd say, I never get asked to do, these private care providers never ask me to do anything. They just give me the money. I would argue that the very taking of the money means that you're very unlikely to, let's put it that way, you're very unlikely to start being critical of private care providers. Just the taking of that money, I would argue, must have some kind of influence on what you then say and what you then do. I'm sure he'd deny that, but that's my argument. So, he had a defence of a kind on that. So, yeah, I mean, Chris, your thoughts on my interaction today with Mr. Streeting?
Well, we've gone from talking about the news to making the news, haven't we? Well, you really. I can't really take any credit for this, but well done. I mean, well done, and it's really it just shows how you can have a bit of good luck, and lo and behold, he's there right in front of you. What I want to know is how did you find? Because I think you've had an interaction with Wes Streeting before. In opposition, I assume. So how did you find him this time? Now I appreciate that it was only 2 or 3 minutes. You can't really gauge properly from that amount of time. But did you get the sense that he was just fobbing you off, or do you think that he was genuinely kind of listening and genuinely wants this meeting? That he said he's going to do.
I don't know if he genuinely wants the meeting, but I think he will have it now, given that he said so on camera. And that footage will be being used by Just Treatment, so look out for it on their socials. But yeah, you're quite right. When he was not long after what happened to Mum had happened, in 2022, back when obviously he was the Shadow Health Secretary, I arranged a day in Parliament where I went down and met him, and indeed met Daisy Cooper, the then Lib Dem health spokesperson and deputy leader, as she still is, of course. She's now the Treasury spokesperson. They both, of course, were very sorry about what happened to my mum and very interested in what had happened and pledging this, that, and the other if they got into government. But since Wes Streeting became the health secretary, since Labour won the election, we've been trying to, get a meeting with him. Not just me, but others in Just Treatment. There was a great friend and colleague, a lady called Muge, who's part of Just Treatment, and she waited 12 hours in A&E with sepsis and could very much have not been here anymore. Thank goodness she is. But basically, Just Treatment is people who, either us or our family members have gone through horrific things as a result of an NHS which we would argue, and I know you'd probably argue against this, Chris, but what we would argue is underfunded and overly privatised. And whatever view you take of that, is not running as you'd want an NHS to run. Now, look, it was good of him today. He could have come out of his office and got straight in his car. I think Wes Streeting is canny enough of a politician. Whatever else you say about him, this guy, knows how to do politics. He's wise enough to know that he needed to be seen to engage with us. Now, did he fob us off? Well, he has his lines, for these things, whatever the question is. But we were saying after that I had to secretly admire him, because whereas I think Keir Starmer, also has his lines, but always looks as if he's delivering lines, right? Always looks robotic, always sounds as if, he's very scripted. Whereas Wes Streeting, a little bit in the style of Tony Blair, his great hero, has the ability to say the lines, which are clearly lines, clearly pre-scripted, pre-planned, pre-briefed, whatever you want to call it, lines, but still sound human and still sound as if he's having a human, interaction with somebody. And so he's clearly a very skilled and very charismatic politician. And yeah, I mean, myself and my colleagues, I think, did as good a job as we could to question him, having been very surprised by him actually being there. But people can have their view when they see the footage. But I know some people don't like kind of direct action, as it's called. In my view, as long as it's peaceful, and we were never going to be anything other than that, I have no problem with it. And I would just point out, in our view, we were only forced to do it because, he would not meet with us. And you may say, well, he doesn't have to. And no, he doesn't have to. But our view is that as the Secretary of State for Health, he should want to meet with a patient-led group, a group that is full of people who either them or their relatives have been through some horrific things as a result of the NHS not working as it should. So, we're now hoping to have a proper sit-down meeting with them, either in Parliament or in the Health Department or wherever. We don't mind where it is, where we can properly go through some of these things. Andy.
Yeah, I was going to comment to say regarding not wanting to, because you talk about direct action and and Just Treatment does quite a lot of stunts. They've interrupted meetings.
I've not personally done that, but others have. Yeah.
No, I will. That does need to be commented. Mathew does not get involved in that kind of thing. Is there a case that he probably finds Just Treatment a bit antagonistic? Is that the issue that Wes Streeting might have when it comes to involving himself with organisations like Just Treatment? And I will just comment as well, I think Wes Streeting is a very good communicator. He's a very good performer, but he does handicap himself sometimes, even amongst his own Labour peers, that he can come across very antagonistic, like he wants to put up a fight and put up a challenge, and it does upset quite a lot of people within the Labour membership and in the broader left, really. So that's just the only thing I want to comment on when it comes to Wes Streeting. And I think in politics, if he wants to become leader, I think what we've learned from Keir Starmer is that he's been really bad at trying to negotiate and work with his backbenchers. And I think Labour, they would be putting themselves in a worse position if they were to sort of look at Wes Streeting as being that answer in terms of the Labour leadership. So, yeah.
I think those are really interesting and very perceptive comments, Andy. I mean, in terms of Just Treatment, I mean, I guess I say this to them, I make them laugh about it, actually. But look, I am at the moderate end of Just Treatment. I mean, as an organisation, they are to the left of me. But I agree with them, on this issue of, the NHS, in our view, needing to be properly funded up to the European average, which we're still not. The last Labour government managed it. We think this one should be able to as well. And also properly public, because, I know that Wes Streeting says, it'll always remain free at the point of use. Well, I should think so, Mr. Streeting. But, no doubt about the fact that from our point of view, more and more of the NHS seems to be being hived off in one way or another, which we don't think is good. So, I'm more than happy to work with Just Treatment. They've been wonderfully supportive over the past 2 years. And look, I mean, all right, albeit, of course, I'd much rather have my mum still here and never have to be involved in this kind of campaigning. But what's happened has happened. And I've done some amazing things with Just Treatment. I've been to Downing Street twice. I've done, numerous TV and radio interviews, etc., etc. So, I mean, they've been an amazing organisation to be involved with. Yes, I mean, I think it's fair to say that they are, much to the left of me. But I'm nonetheless, very proud to work with them. They're a great bunch of people. And I guess all I can say, guys, is watch this space. Mr. Streeting has now pledged on camera to have a meeting with us, and we very look forward to that happening. We're going to get on to Labour more broadly in just a second, but just to respond to Andy on the Labour leadership, I think it's going to be really interesting. I still think it'll probably come down to Wes Streeting versus Angela Rayner, and I think that is going to be a battle and a half. Right? We're all going to get the
two of Chris's favourite people, I'm sure.
Yeah. Chris just won't know who to choose from.
Team Angela.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Angela Rayner's politics is much more close to mine and yours, I think, Andy. But never count Wes Streeting out. I mean, as I gathered today, as much as any other time, he is a canny operator. That is absolutely for sure. And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens. But yes, I mean, thanks very much, Chris, for your earlier comments. Yeah, we have made a little bit of news today. And just before we move on to talk about Labour more broadly, I did actually manage to get time after this this interaction with Mr. Streeting to record this exclusive video for us here at Political Frenemies.
So I'm outside Wes Streeting's office today. He is, of course, the Health Secretary. I'm here in Ilford North, his constituency, and I'm here with the great people from Just Treatment who I campaign with after I lost my beloved mum 2 days after she waited 11 hours for an ambulance in 2022. We've been trying, as a patient-led campaign group, to meet with Mr. Streeting for well over a year, and we've had to come to his office today to try and meet with him. As it happens, as we were just setting up, Mr. Streeting came out of his office and we were able to ask him who is pulling his strings. If he doesn't want to meet with patients like us or family members of patients who've been failed by the NHS but who still believe in the NHS as a properly funded and properly public service, then who is he meeting with? Well, the answer is that he's taking more than £200,000 from the private sector. Why is he doing that? Why is he meeting with private donors and not patients? This is Mathew Hulbert for Political Frenemies, outside Wes Streeting's office.
So there you go, folks. So watch this space on what happens with Mr. Streeting, and if we do indeed get that meeting with him, we'd better. Let's turn on to Labour more broadly then, and what we're calling illiberal Labour, because I don't know what is going on with them this week. They're slashing jury trials in a number of cases. We can talk about that. They're postponing a number of mayoral elections. They would have their reasoning for it, but it just seems like they're postponing them because they think they will lose them. We've also had David Lammy making some comments, which I have to say I would agree with as a Lib Dem, and I'm sure Andy would too, about us re-entering the custom union. And also we've got to factor in that Labour are way down in the polls. I know there was one particular poll, and we can debate about whether all polling companies are as how can I put it, as accurate as others, but Labour in one poll were down on 14%. I mean, just incredible. So Andy, coming to you first, perhaps starting on the slashing of the jury trials. What have you made of that this week?
I mean, what David Lammy is doing is just completely ripping up a cherished principle of our justice system here in England and Wales. I mean, it dates back from the Magna Carta. I know that often gets used a lot, but it's true. And it's the idea that you are tried by your peers and a civic judicial system. Those are our fundamental principles of our judicial process. And we have to be mindful that there is a serious lack of diversity when it comes to using magistrates and even more particularly judges in the Crown Court, with it mostly being white and privately educated, massively overrepresenting that population. In fact, and I've got some notes right here. There is a study by the Social Mobility Commission and Sutton Trust in 2019. So it's a little bit dated, but that was the most up-to-date findings that I could find in it. I'm sure it hasn't changed that much since then. That 2/3 of judges were privately educated against a population of just 7%. 86% were white British and 60% were men. So not even on the gender they can get an equality there. You know, as far as I remember, it's 50-50 when it comes to male and female representation in this country. So, you know, the jury system is meant to act as a counterweight against prejudice and reflect the principles of the great writ of our liberty, which is a pillar of us being a civilised society. Ironically, comments that even David Lammy himself once said, you know, jury system's there to prevent prejudice, and he attacked the Conservatives when they were looking under Cameron and then I think again under Boris Johnson to reform the jury system. And now he's just done a complete U-turn. And for me, I think it's really like David Lammy's defence is that we need to do it because not because he personally believes in it, but because we've got a backlog. But I think it's ignored. And you mentioned about funding in the NHS, in the health service, but I think it's ignoring a real issue, which is the lack of funding compared to most European countries when it comes to our courts and through our criminal process. And we are a very unique case in that we do have a really massive backlog compared to Europe. But the European countries that have a jury system, they aren't reforming the jury system. They aren't getting rid of juries. They're using alternative methods. Like in Canada, they're doing what they call them laypersons. So you'd still have a jury system, but it'd be reduced to 6. So I think we have 12 currently, but you reduce it to 6, and you have a panel of 3 judges. So that's an alternative that they can look towards. Another method is very similar to the Netherlands and in parts of America, that you have special courts when it comes to drugs or complex needs. So rather than going through the court process, you try and fix those complex needs. So before it escalates for them becoming serious criminals, when you've done your first drug offence and it's been non-violent, let's try and fix you. Let's try and help the person through alternative restorative justice. And I just think it's a very dangerous slippery slope that Davy Lammy's trying to do. I mean, where will this stop when it comes to our judicial process?
So, Chris, hopefully this is one issue where perhaps all 3 of us might agree.
Yeah, shocking, isn't it? Really? Yeah. I mean, I think that this is a crazy sort of proposal. It reflects, for me anyway, a real sort of pattern of behaviour which is concerning with this Labour government. I might have used some more fruity language on Twitter this week, but I do think. I do think it's concerning because you have Labour proposing various measures which which go against, like, cherish sort of rights or liberties and so forth, and they're proposing this, and it wasn't in the manifesto, and they're just gone ahead with it and just proposed it regardless of whether it's in the manifesto or public opinion. So you have digital ID, which we've talked about a bit before. I mean, but especially those of us on the right have concerns about Labour's record on free speech, and of course you have the other issue as well, which is which Mathew mentioned, which was the postponement of the mayoral elections as well. Now, some people might say that these are, inaugural elections for the new positions of mayors as part of the restructuring of local government. But the fact of the matter is, I'm very uneasy and very uncomfortable with cancelling and postponing elections which are scheduled, and this sets. Labour's done it before. I think the Tories did it as well. But it just sets a a bad precedent, which could escalate up to the national level. You can sort of foresee that. So I don't know whether you share this to the degree that I do, but I'm very concerned about the direction this government is going in, proposing what I would consider to be illiberal measures. And as Andy said sort of earlier, where is this going to lead to? I mean, what other ideas have Labour cooked up that are not in the manifesto, which they're just going to spring on us and going to use their majority to ram through? It's very concerning.
Well, I broadly agree with the both of you on this, and it's quite rare actually that we all agree on something on this podcast. So I think that just shows how wrong Labour is here. That from kind of left to right they're being attacked on left, centre, and right, that they're being attacked on this. By the by, I wrote my midweek Mathew on Substack on this issue, so folks do go and have a look at that. I have to get a little plug in, But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that this is deeply illiberal, and I totally understand about the backlog. I really do get that. But as Andy quite rightly points out, there are a number of ways that backlog could begin to be dealt with that doesn't just swipe away this really important part of our liberty and our justice.
So I could also add to that they could open the courts for longer. There are apparently sitting days that are not even being used. So there's some other ideas as well.
And to add to that, Chris, I actually, because I did do some notes for this. Studies show that actually having a judge trial only reduces the trial by 15 to 20%, and in some cases even less than that. And the real problem, it's a fundamental structural and funding issue. And I could speak, because my aunt used to be the head of the probation service in Manchester, and when their funding got, because a lot of the court, because there's more to the court process than just the arrest and the trial and the conviction or non-conviction. There's a lot more things going on. You involve health workers, social workers, the probation service. My heart was heavily indebted to that. She worked 40 years in the probation service, and she just saw in the last few years how it was completely gutted. And they were having caseloads and they have to do reports, because you've got to, to be in a civilised society. Yes, if you commit a crime, you pay the penalty, but you also, part of the criminal process is about making sure they don't commit the crime again, and retribution and rehabilitation. And if there's a low-level offender who you could realistically be reformed before they go out to do bigger crimes, then you need to involve the social workers and the health workers. And we've got crumbling court buildings, roofs collapsing. So Labour are just, and they make it sound like it's just in isolation to us. And like I said, European countries are going through that. But the reason why ours is so bad at the moment is because of the lack of funding.
And at the same time, Chris, that this has been happening this week. We've also had the very same David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, having to admit that yet more prisoners have been released early. I mean, what is going on?
Yeah, I mean, again, it just illustrates sort of chaos within the Ministry of Justice and within the prison service. It's interesting that Lammy can announce this on national TV, whereas a few weeks ago, Prime Minister's questions, when he was deputising for Starmer, he didn't. He was asked repeatedly. Remember that when James Cartledge asked him repeatedly, are there sort of new cases of this? But Lammy sort of just refused to answer. It's funny how Labour just changes the rules whenever it suits them, but it is concerning. But I do think that it is a result of the lack of priority among all governments in terms of security. I would say defence as well, but and policing. I think I know we talked about health earlier, but I do think we do need to look at the what the state is for. I do think that despite ministers and politicians saying that the first duty of government is security and so forth, they don't actually practice it. When you look at the proportion of funding on security, on policing, on justice, so I think there are questions there about have we neglected the fundamental functions of the state in terms of funding and reform as well.
I would agree with you, Chris, on that because I think it should be both. I think it should be defence, health, and the courts and policing. You might have slight disagreement on the health bit, but I completely agree with you. I think we've been a bit too off the mark when it comes to this. But fundamentally, I would also add to that: what is the purpose of sort of prisoner reform? And I do think we need to look at alternative methods because a lot of these prisoners, they go into prison, it becomes an academy for becoming worst criminals. Right. And I do think when it comes to issues like if you get a conviction on drugs and it's been non-violent, I seriously think we need to look at alternative methods like they do in Portugal with their own drug court. And again, like I said, like in the Netherlands and parts of America, I think it's in New York, typical liberal states. We need to look at like those more rehabilitative methods and restorative justice rather than just banging them up in prison and making them even more criminals when they get released. And that's just my final point, really, when it comes to that issue.
And I absolutely agree. And I know people are going to say, "Oh, you woolly liberals," but I think, look, I think
it's pragmatic. It's factual. The evidence shows.
What I would say to that is that rehabilitation, education, yes, it's important, but I think you need the punishment. Like if you just go straight to rehabilitation, then obviously it depends on the criminal. But if you have a hardened criminal, then they're not going to be as receptive to that if they don't have the punishment element to it. And there's a deterrence element to justice as well, which is important.
There is, but equally, Chris, I do get the sense a little bit that you're. This is perhaps overstating it, but I don't mind that you're a little bit of a lock the door and throw away the key. I mean, I don't think you're especially bothered about whether people are rehabilitated.
I mean, like when it comes to violent criminals, I think they should go to prison. I make no secret on that. I think if you've committed a violent act or any sexual offences, you should go to prison. That does not mean you can't be rehabilitated in prison because there's some excellent work that the probation service do whilst you're in prison. And again, lack of funding means often they escape the net, they release them, and they just can't. The caseloads are just like ridiculous, and was having real difficulties in keeping on top of her caseload with the people under her as she was managing. But no, I don't disagree with that. But I think when it comes to low-level offences, I would rather try and fix the issue before they go in to prisons, where it's basically an academy for them to become worse criminals with those violent offenders. I want them locked up in prison and help the ones who might have a drug offence. Sure, and also let's be real. And my cousin can vouch for this because he's a prisoner himself. He's a policeman himself. Manchester on a night out, probably a good lot are just on drugs, and it's like, you know what? They're not harming anyone. They're not hurting anyone. He could easily arrest them. He could say, "Can you empty your pockets, please?" But he thought, you know what? Why bother? Why bother? Because all you're going to do is it's going to destroy their lives. It's going to destroy. Could impact their work. They might end up in prison, and they'll just end up as worse criminals in his eyes. I should point out he no longer he no longer works as a policeman because he had issues with the politics that goes on by governments of the past few years.
Well, and that's another issue as well, isn't it? But Chris, I mean, do you accept that? Yeah, I mean, as Andy quite rightly says, people involved in violent crime, in rape, in any of these murder, in any of these dreadful things, absolutely, of course, should go to prison and should go to prison for a long time. But do you accept that for much lesser crimes, often the issue is societal, and you're not going to necessarily fix that in prison?
I think think one of the things also to consider is what I said in terms of deterrence, and what I would like to see is for the crimes not to be committed in the first place. So yes, you have a decent education system, so that so it gives young people skills and opportunities and so forth. But I do think that the system at the moment, particularly with what you might call low level crime, although it affects people. I'm thinking in particular, for example, the shoplifting, which is just kind of allowed to happen now. You all seen the videos of people just like helping themselves, like clearing out the shelves as well. I just think what would be effective in relation to that is more deterrence. Is the fact that instead of not doing anything under sort of £200, which was the rule at one point. You do need to put a deterrent in. I think part of the problem is that there is a lack of deterrence. So, but even so yes, I just see this kind of a bit differently.
But even then, and I don't expect you to do anything other, Chris. But even then, even in terms of shoplifting. Now, of course, it's always wrong. I'm not going to sit here and defend it, but I do think it depends on who it is. And whether there's a societal reason, because for example, I remember debating this on Talk years ago. When there was a spate of young mums taking things like baby formula and nappies and things. No, should they be stealing those things? No, clearly they shouldn't. But I would argue, and I did argue on Talk on that occasion, that there were societal reasons that these mums felt they had no other choice but to do that. And I don't think you'd help their situation by, I don't know if they would get a prison sentence, something like that, but even in theory, by banging them up. I mean, you clearly wouldn't. They need help. They need financial help, budgeting help, whatever it is. So I think these things have to be judged on kind of individual cases. I do just want to have a little bit more of a word on the postponing of the elections, because I think this is a really big thing.
Yeah.
Now, Labour would argue, Andy, that they're doing it because they're doing this reorganisation, and we shouldn't have the elections until whatever their defence is. I think we've heard it this week. I think most people involved in politics or interested in politics think that the real reason is because they fear they're going to lose these mayoral contests, primarily to Reform, but maybe in some cases to the Lib Dems or the Greens as well. But you can't just postpone elections because you think you might lose them, can you?
No, I mean, even if there's a valid case to be made about the local government reorganisation, politics is often about image, perception, and theatre, and this looks totally off. Totally off. They might have been a little bit more forgiven if Labour was riding high in the polls and they were doing this reorganisation, and they said, "Oh, we've got to postpone the election," or at least it was looking competitive between Labour and another party. But the fact that they are completely tanking in the polls, in which I think you've said, find out now poll 14%. I mean, never I would thought in my current adult life that I would see Labour drop. This is the Labour Party, founded in the 1900s, who completely overtook the party of old, the Liberal Party, and dominated politics throughout the 20th century. And I completely agree, Mathew. This is not a good look for Labour, and I think if Labour was wise, they would drop these proposals and just go ahead with it. I do not know what is going on with their comms team, because every time something comes out, it's like a head palm moment. It's like, what the heck? What are you doing?
It absolutely is, and I wonder what's going on at Downing Street and Labour HQ and all the rest of it. Chris, I just want to.
I should say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I should say, I think the 4 that has been postponed, Reform are on track to win those. Right. So you can just, you can just draw your own conclusion from that.
That's right.
It's not a good look.
Chris, I wasn't going to raise this, but I've just made myself a little note here, given what you said about Parliament and and David Lammy and what he's prepared to say in Parliament and what he isn't. It's just a little something to note in terms of Parliament and this Labour government's, what some would argue, lack of respect towards Parliament. So we've had, and this has been the case with previous governments of other parties too. Let's not pretend otherwise. But you've got, this speaker, and I have to say, I don't personally have a lot of time for Lindsay Hoyle. I think there's been much better speakers.
John Bercow.
Well, I mean, he had his own controversies, but certainly Betty
Boothwood for me.
Certainly Betty Boothwood,
even though I wasn't born then.
The current speaker, yet again this week, pointed out to the government that it needs to be making, key policy announcements to Parliament first and not on the media. And then we had this thing, Chris, where Starmer was apparently told off by Lindsay Hoyle after Prime Minister's questions for doing this thing which he's got into a habit of doing, which is answering the first question, which is a general question about what are your engagements today, Prime Minister, with some grand policy statement to try and make news at the very start of the session. Lindsay Hoyle looks on that very disdainfully, I think.
Yeah, and you could say both sides have played the game in relation to not leaking stuff to the press or briefing stuff to the press before making announcements in Parliament. But certainly there does seem to be a lack of respect for Parliament among this government, and I think that's partly due to the fact that they've got such a big majority that they think that they can do whatever they want. But we had the controversy over the budget, over all of the leaks before that. Indeed, in the OBR, so the head had to resign over sort of the leak in their organisation before. Just before the budget was announced. Funny enough, it happened in the OBR, but not in the Treasury, not in terms of Rachel Reeves. Given all of the pre-budget shenanigans, and I just suppose, some people, and even myself, have said, well, why do we have this? Why is particularly the Speaker so sensitive about pre-announcements before making them in Parliament? Well, we've seen with what Rachel Reeves had done just how damaging it can be to make pre-announcements or to speculate. Given that all of her speculation sort of made the markets all jittery. So it just goes to show. It just goes to show that. There is chaos, and this government is prone to leaking, and which is very damaging.
Look, things don't seem to get better for Labour. We keep hearing that one day it's going to get better, but it certainly hasn't yet. And I could almost feel sorry for them if they weren't doing so many bad things. So I won't feel sorry. I won't feel sorry for them. Let's spend the final few minutes talking about the other side of politics, the right of politics. And there's been lots of rumours and statements made this week about did Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, say to donors kind of behind his hand that he was in favour of some kind of pact with the Tories. He's denied that. The Tories have denied wanting any involvement with reform. I'll come to you first on this, Chris, because one of your big things on this pod since we began is the view from your perspective that there needs to be some kind of rapprochement between Reform UK and the Conservatives. Do you think number one, do you think it's likely that Farage did say this, even if he denies it? Number two, whether he did or he didn't, do you think that that this does need to happen? You clearly do think that. And number three, do you think that even though they deny it now, because I guess they feel they have to, that at some point before the next election there'll be a coming together?
Yeah, I have no idea whether he said it at this donors was it dinner or meeting or whatever. I just don't know. It's come from somewhere. It may have been a misunderstanding, but as I've said on the podcast before, it's I just find, I just tear my hair out at the fact that the Tory. My beef is with is this pointless sort of this division between the Tory right and reform, and I'm sort of stuck in the middle, just like if you want to slug it out for the next 3 years, then you do that. So I'm just not interested. I'm interested in developing ideas and trying to get rid of this absolutely useless government. So I think there should be some sort of understanding or agreement at some point. Do I think it's going to happen? I doubt it. I don't think Farage will deputise for anybody.
Right.
But although it's interesting that Farage said this week about generic, about if he wants to have a conversation, then he will be up for it. So who knows?
But Chris, that was about generic joining a Farage-led administration.
Yeah. That's the thing. Will either the leaders of the Tories or Reform deputise for the other? I pretty much doubt it. And the Tories obviously have their proud identity, their proud tradition, stretching back centuries.
We can debate whether it's proud or not, but yes.
I just unfortunately I don't see it. Sorry, what was that?
Well, I just find it ironic that the anti-establishment party that is Reform UK, if this is substantiated, Farage wants to do a deal with the most establishment party going, a party that lasted centuries, probably the first political party in the Great Britain and the United Kingdom. Possibly Mathew. I think the Whigs and the Liberals were in there too, but just to sort of give it a bit more colour. So I just find that quite laughable that Farage claims we are the anti-establishment parties, and yet they're getting all these Tory defectors, and a lot of them are pretty much just has-been failed politicians who have just got gripes with the party, and now they're jumping ship because it's like, oh, this looks like a new home for them. But I will say it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for this to happen. Even in the Liberal Party, we did a pact with Labour, which I think in hindsight was a mistake. I think it was very regrettable, and it completely it destroyed our chance to appeal to a working class base. I think, like Mathew says, we should have probably strangled the Labour Party at birth, but there we go. I think it is something that the left is going to have to be on guard on, because in history the left has always suffered because it split themselves. So before it was the Tories, then it was like Labour and the Liberals / Alliance / Lib Dems. But now we've got a fourth left wing. Well, we've got the Nationalist Party, so that's two, and now we've got the Greens. And we could probably debate whether to count Reform your party or not. Sorry?
I'm just going to say I'm your party in theory as well, yeah.
Well, we could debate that another time, but... and I think we are going to have to seriously wake up with that because, right now, the Tories and Reform are splitting the right vote, as Chris says. However, I don't think any deal with the Tories would be an easy one, because you have got quite a few Reform voters who are economically to the left. Right. How is that going to work with a still quite Thatcherite party? So I think Reform needs to be a little bit careful. So I can kind of understand why Farage has kind of backed out of that and said, oh no, we wouldn't deal with the Tories. I know some Reform vote, actually one of them is close in my family. I know one Reform voter who said if they go with the Tories, I will just not vote. I will not get. They won't vote for anyone, but they will just not vote.
Yeah, that is the danger, Chris, isn't it? I mean, I know you advocate for some kind of agreement between the two parties, but Reform would argue, and I think it's increasingly ridiculous for them to argue this, given how many Tory retreads have now joined Reform, as Andy says. But they would argue that they're not a Tory party. They're something different to that. They are trying. I mean, I still think, as I said on LBC the other week, I still think that Farage is not Thatcherite, but they're trying, in theory, to do this, economically left, socially right thing. And how on earth is that going to align with a Badenoch-run Conservatives?
Well, there's still plenty of conservative elements to what Reform is proposing and offering. Especially on sort of defence, crime, obviously immigration. The main thrust of what they're doing. And in relation, how do you reconcile the fact that that you can have lots of Tories wanting to join or have joined Reform? I think I wouldn't see the Tories as kind of one block. I think a lot of the defectors to Reform are people on the Tory right who were against or who were disillusioned with how the establishment Tories, or the Tory wets as they used to be known, or the Tory left have how kind of unradical they were in terms of trying to make the country more aligned to conservatism and not and not adhere to the sort of previous sort of Blairite Cameroon sort of orthodoxy. So that's the challenge: is how do you present the those Tories who've defected as different to what the establishment Tories were offering during their time in government. And I'm one of the people who obviously was a Conservative, but was absolutely frustrated at just the inaction of the last sort of government. So there's plenty of us, there's plenty of people like us around, and it's up to either the Tories or Reform to say we're going to be different, and the next right-wing government is going to be a reforming, and not a capital R reforming government, but a small r reforming government that will deliver actual change and actually deliver an actual conservative, actual conservative government.
Andy?
I think Chris makes a really good point about all parties are coalitions, and I think there's truth in that. And actually, what I will say as my last comment, Mathew, is that actually, if the Tories and Reform do a deal, it might be a net benefit for the Lib Dems, because you might get the One Nationers or the Liberal Tories will go, you know what, your Heseltines, your Ken Clarks, and from the backbenchers in the parliamentary Tory party go, you know what, this I will not do. It's time for me to jump ship. So it might actually be a transaction that will help both sides, really, for Lib Dems and Tory Reform advances.
Well, we can but hope so on that. Chris, just before we end, I wanted to just get a quick word from you on this huge donation that Reform had. I mean, really huge donation that Reform had this week. And then, if you can, just touch on this spat with the BBC this week as well.
Yeah, so this huge was it £9 million donation, sort of the biggest sort of donation that we've seen in politics. And again, it just illustrates that despite the fact that Badenoch has improved at the dispatch box, it's not making a difference in the outside world, and still the momentum is with Reform UK. In terms of this spat with the BBC, I mean that there've been allegations about what Nigel Farage may or may not have said when he was at school, and basically Nigel Farage said, well, at the period when he was at school, the BBC were doing programmes like Alf Garnett and the Black and White Minstrel Show, and
Alf
so
Garnett was a satire of that. I mean,
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, the writer.
People don't
Johnny
understand
Spates,
the joke.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry,
Johnny Spates said he was a left winger, and he said he created Alf Garnett, to really show how kind of nasty that kind of character is.
Well, quite. And I think, we have to be careful what we say. Of course we do, but I think I'm right in saying that Farage has in effect said that yes, he said some of this stuff, but that he didn't mean it in a hurtful way or with malice. Now, I don't personally know how you can say that stuff and it not be. But anyway, that's his.
I think it's important. I think it's important just to say that he's denied the specific allegations, but what he did say is that he engaged in banter. Which wasn't, this is his explanation that wasn't sort of deliberately malicious or intent to be hurtful, but he does deny the specific sort of allegations that had been made.
Just before we end, and I know that Chris loves this segment, I just want to have a few seconds on the good old Liberal Democrats, because I know
Lib Dem time.
I know it's Chris's favourite part of the show, but I know, Andy, you wanted to have a few words on the Deputy Leader, Daisy Cooper.
Yes, so just a quick one. So she was appeared on Question Time last night, and I know at the moment we've really been struggling to sort of hit airwaves and get people talking about us. And to be honest, I do like Daisy Cooper a lot. I really like her. But I do get a bit nervous sometimes because I think she can be a bit hit or miss depending on the day. I think sometimes she can be great in terms of her performance, her debating skills. And then other times she can just sort of like get more blanks than hits, really. But yesterday... there was a video going around that went viral. It's at the moment, from my last check, it's got like 20,000 likes on Instagram alone, and that's just on Instagram, thousands of likes, in which Daisy Cooper went after talking about the refugees crisis, about how in 2016, we had no people on boats, and yet since Brexit, we've ripped up 27 return agreements, and now that's what caused it. And it got a huge round of applause from the audience, and it's got a lot of traction online, and I felt really proud of it. I think she's one to watch. Daisy Cooper.
Under the returns agreements, we didn't actually return that many. But
you have to spoil things.
No, he always does.
No, I will say this.
He can't let us have our fun.
So I know we're over time. I will say something nice. Actually, I will say something nice. Daisy Cooper actually stands out to me in the sense that whenever she deputises for Ed Davey, she actually holds the government to account. I mean, how's about that? I mean, something that Ed Davey practically never does.
Well,
actually, Daisy Cooper actually does that whenever she.
She's a lot more of a bulldog. She's more of a bulldog, our Daisy. Whereas I like Ed, but he can come across as a little bit like a vicar in a church asking for the roof to be fixed.
And I have to say, going back to one of our earlier topics, I'm amazed that another week went by this week where Ed Davey didn't ask about the right to a trial by jury. I'm amazed that as Lib Dem leader at Prime Minister's Questions, he's not asked about that.
End goal.
Yeah, I mean, just if we can't ask about that as Lib Dems, then yeah. But anyway, this has been really fun. Andy, thanks so much. Always a joy for you to come on, and we'll have you on again. We'll have you on again soon. And folks, if you haven't checked out the other podcast that me and Andy do, it's strangely enough titled the Mathew and Andy podcast. I don't know how we came up with that. Then do go and check it out on YouTube and on Spotify. We do a little bit of politics, not a lot, but we do a little bit of politics. But we do lots of life. We do, people chat and talk about what we're watching, listening to, and reading. And it's just a really cosy podcast. You can sit down in front of your log fire if you've got one, and with a nice cuppa, and watch or listen to our podcast. So there you go. So do make sure you do that.
And I should say that bit where Andy surprised you with the offer of visiting over Christmas. Yeah, that was a very sort of moving moment. So
yeah, I mean, I was totally not expecting that. I won't explain it all here, folks. You'll have to go and watch the reasoning behind that over at Mathew and Andy. Andy, thanks so much. We'll see you again soon. Dr. Newton, always a joy, he says, and totally not lying. And we'll see you folks again. Oh, I must just say, I can't forget my little bit, can I? Do all the internet-y things. Yeah. Like, subscribe, follow at Political Frenemies on Twitter. Do all of that. And I should just point out as well, because I have confirmed it already, that joining us next week is our regular Green commentator, Daniel Laycock. So it'll be really good to have Daniel back with us. But from Andy, from Chris, and from me, we'll see you next week on Political Frenemies.